Welcome back to my channel. Today we will learn about the issue that has shaken Port Charles to its very core and sent the Corinthos organization into immediate lockdown. The peaceful morning routine at the industrial docks of Port Charles was shattered in the most horrifying way possible when dock workers made a discovery that would send ripples of fear throughout the entire criminal underworld and change everything Sonny Corinthos thought he knew about: his enemies. The day started like any other, at the bustling Port Charles waterfront. The morning shift workers arrived with their usual coffee in hand, ready to process the incoming shipments that arrived overnight. The sound of forklifts and container cranes filled the air as the crew began their routine inspections of the cargo that had been delivered. During the night, however, what began as an ordinary Thursday morning quickly transformed into a nightmare scenario that none of these hardworking men would ever forget for the rest of their lives. As the workers approached a specific section of the dock where 3 particular shipping containers had been placed, they immediately noticed something was wrong. A dark liquid was seeping from the bottom edges of each container, pooling on the concrete and creating an eerie scene in the early morning light. The substance had a viscous quality that didn't look like oil or any normal industrial fluid. The dock supervisor immediately called for a halt to operations in that area and contacted the authorities, sensing that whatever was inside those containers was not part of any legitimate shipment. Before the police could arrive, however, 2 men appeared on the scene with an urgency that suggested they had been monitoring the situation closely. Brick, the trusted technical expert and security specialist for the Corinthos organization, arrived alongside Jason Morgan, Sonny's right-hand man and enforcer. Their presence at the docks was no coincidence. These containers had been flagged in their system as part of a shipment that was supposedly connected to their organization's operations. The tracking information had indicated this was a legitimate delivery that required their personal oversight, which is why they rushed to the scene as soon as they received word of the suspicious leak. What Jason and Brick found when they forced open the first container was beyond anything they could have imagined in their worst nightmares. Inside the dark, cold metal box lay the body of a man they both recognized immediately. He was one of Sonny's most trusted operatives, a gunman who had been with the organization for years and had proven his loyalty time and time again, but loyalty meant nothing to whoever had done this. The man's body showed signs of torture and violence, and most chillingly, there was a playing card pinned directly to his chest. The card bore a strange symbol that neither Jason nor Brick had seen before, but its message was crystal clear. This was a warning. This was punishment for those who dared to ask questions. With growing dread, Jason and Brick moved to the second container. The scene inside was identical to the first. Another body. Another trusted soldier from Sonny's organization. Another playing card with that same mysterious symbol. The second victim was a man who had been recruited specifically for his intelligence gathering skills. He was someone Sonny had personally selected for a sensitive mission because of his ability to move through the criminal underworld without drawing attention. Now he was nothing more than a message in a metal coffin. The third container completed the trifecta of horror. Inside was the body of the third operative, a young man who had recently proven himself invaluable to the organization through his technological expertise and his fearlessness in dangerous situations. Like his fallen comrades, he bore the mark of the playing card on his chest. 3 men, 3 cards. 3 deaths that sent one unmistakable message to Sonny Corinthos and his entire organization. As Jason immediately called Sonny with the devastating news, the pieces began falling into place. These 3 men had not been sent on random assignments. They had all been part of a specific operation that Sonny had personally ordered weeks earlier. Their mission had been singular and crucial: investigate and uncover the true identity of a mysterious figure who had been operating in the shadows of Port Charles's criminal underworld. This person, known only by the initial C, had been making moves that threatened the established order. Resources were being redirected. Territories were being encroached upon. Information was being leaked. Someone was playing a dangerous game, and Sonny needed to know who. The 3 operatives had been chosen because they were the best at what they did. They knew how to ask questions without revealing their true intentions. They knew how to follow leads without being followed themselves. They knew how to extract information from reluctant sources. Or at least they thought they knew. Clearly, someone had been watching them the entire time. Someone had known exactly what they were doing, who they were working for, and what they were trying to discover. and that someone had decided to make an example out of them? The playing cards were not just random objects chosen for dramatic effect. The symbol on each card was deliberate and meaningful. It was a calling card, a signature that this mysterious sea wanted to be recognized. The message was clear: those who seek to uncover my identity will face severe consequences. The card served as both a punishment for the dead men and a warning to everyone else in the organization. Stop looking for me, or you will end up like them. Back at the Corinthos estate, Sonny received Jason's call with a controlled fury that his closest associates knew all too well. This was not just an attack on his organization. This was a direct challenge to his authority and a threat to everyone he cared about. The fact that C had managed to identify Sonny's investigators, capture them, execute them, and deliver their bodies back to Port Charles without anyone in the organization noticing until it was too late demonstrated a level of operational capability that was deeply concerning. This enemy was not some upstart trying to make a name for themselves. This was someone with resources, intelligence networks, and the kind of calculated ruthlessness that made them extremely dangerous. Sonny's immediate response was decisive and comprehensive. He ordered an immediate lockdown of all operations. Every safe house was to be secured. Every member of the organization was to report their location and status. All ongoing operations were to be suspended until further notice. No one was to take any action without direct authorization from either Sonny or Jason. The organization was effectively moving to martial law, a state of high alert that hadn't been necessary in years. Every territory under Corinthos' control would be locked down tight. Guards would be doubled. Surveillance would be increased. And most importantly, family members would be moved to secure locations where they could be protected around the clock. The implications of this discovery extended far beyond the immediate shock and grief over the loss of 3 loyal soldiers. Sonny now understood that he was dealing with an adversary who possessed capabilities that rivaled or possibly exceeded his own organization's resources. The fact that C had known about the investigation from the very beginning suggested that there was either a leak within the Corinthos organization, or that C had access to surveillance and intelligence gathering methods that were sophisticated beyond anything Sonny had encountered before. Either possibility was terrifying in its own way. A leak within the organization would mean that someone close to Sonny, someone he trusted, was feeding information to the enemy. It would mean that every conversation, every plan, every decision could potentially be compromised. It would create an atmosphere of suspicion and paranoia that could tear the organization apart from within, which might be exactly what C wanted. The alternative, that C simply had superior intelligence capabilities, was perhaps even more disturbing because it suggested an enemy with nearly unlimited resources and reach. Jason's mind was already racing through the possibilities as he secured the crime scene and waited for the authorities to arrive. The police would have questions, of course, but Jason had dealt with such situations before. The official story would be that these were unfortunate victims of gang violence. Their connection to the Corinthos organization would be downplayed or denied, and the investigation would likely go nowhere, as it always did when it involved matters related to Port Charles's criminal underworld. But the internal investigation within the Corinthos organization would be thorough and relentless. Jason would personally oversee every aspect of it. They needed to know how C had identified their operatives. They needed to know where the men had been captured. They needed to know who had seen them last. They needed to know everything. Brick, meanwhile, was already beginning the technical analysis. The containers themselves would provide clues. Where had they come from? How had they been routed through the shipping system? Who had arranged for them to be delivered to this specific location? The tracking numbers on the containers had identified them as Corinthos shipments, which meant someone had hacked into their logistics system or had obtained legitimate credentials. Either scenario pointed to a level of sophistication that was extremely concerning. Brick would need to audit every system, every network, every communication channel to determine how their security had been compromised. As news of the discovery spread through the organization, the reaction was exactly what Sonny had anticipated. Fear mixed with anger. Shock mixed with determination. The men and women who worked for Sonny Corinthos were not easily frightened, but the brutal efficiency of this attack had rattled even the most hardened veterans. The message sent by those three bodies in those three containers was received loud and clear. We know who you are, we know what you're doing, and we can reach you whenever we want. It was psychological warfare at its most effective, designed to create doubt and hesitation at a time when the organization needed to be strong and unified. Sonny gathered his inner circle for an emergency meeting at a secure location. Jason was there, of course, along with Brick and several other key lieutenants. The mood in the room was grim as Sonny laid out the situation in stark terms. They were facing an enemy unlike any they had encountered before. This was not a rival mob family looking to take over territory. This was not a vengeful enemy seeking retribution for past wrongs. This was someone playing a much longer and more complex game. Someone who had been planning this for a long time. Someone who had studied the Corinthos organization thoroughly and knew exactly where to strike to cause maximum damage and fear. The immediate priorities were clear. First, protect the family. Carly, Michael, Christina, Donna, Avery, and anyone else connected to Sonny needed to be secured immediately. Their movements would be restricted, their security details increased, and their communications monitored for any signs of surveillance or threats. Second, secure the organization's assets and operations. Every business, every account, every safe house needed to be verified and protected. Third, find the leak if there was one. Every member of the organization would need to be vetted their activities, reviewed their loyalties, confirmed. Fourth, gather intelligence on this mysterious C. Someone in Port Charles had to know something about who this person was and what they wanted. But, as the meeting progressed, it became clear that this was going to be more difficult than any challenge the organization had faced in recent memory. C had demonstrated an ability to operate in complete secrecy while simultaneously showing that they had detailed knowledge of Corinthos operations. It was a contradiction that suggested either multiple operatives working together or a single individual with extraordinary resources and capabilities. The playing card signature was unusual for the Port Charles criminal underworld. It suggested someone who wanted their work to be recognized but their identity to remain hidden. It was theatrical and symbolic, which might provide clues to C's psychology and motivations if they could be properly analyzed. Jason proposed an alternative approach to the investigation. Instead of sending more people out to ask questions about C, which had clearly been compromised, they would focus on defensive measures and passive intelligence gathering. They would monitor communications, watch for patterns, and wait for C to make another move. Because C would make another move, the delivery of the bodies was not an ending, but a beginning. This was someone who wanted to engage with Sonny, to challenge him to prove something. The question was, what did C ultimately want? Was this about territory, money, power, revenge, or was it something else entirely? As dawn broke over Port Charles, on what had started as an ordinary Thursday morning, the city's criminal underworld had been fundamentally altered. The discovery of those three bodies in those three containers had sent shockwaves through every organization, every family, and every operation. If someone could strike at the Corinthos organization with such precision and brutality, then no one was safe. The balance of power that had existed for years was suddenly in question, and somewhere in the shadows, the mysterious figure known only as C was watching and waiting for what would happen next. The martial law imposed by Sonny Corinthos would affect every aspect of life in Port Charles for the foreseeable future. The docks would be under constant surveillance. The businesses would operate under enhanced security protocols. The streets would be patrolled more heavily. And the hunt for C would continue, but it would be conducted with far more caution and awareness of the dangers involved. Sonny had learned a hard lesson at the cost of 3 loyal men's lives, and he would not make the same mistake twice. The war with C had officially begun, and neither side could afford to lose.